There I was, sitting on my porch that October evening, watching the sun disappear behind the peaks of my mountain home. The silence up here was what I loved most. No neighbors for miles, just me and the wilderness. I had moved to this remote place 3 years ago, tired of the noise and chaos of city life. My cabin sat at the edge of a clearing, surrounded by pine trees that seemed to touch the sky. I was sipping my coffee when something caught my attention. A streak of light crossed the darkening sky, bright and fast, heading directly toward the mountain range to my west. At first, I thought it was a shooting star, but it was too slow, too controlled. The light grew brighter and brighter until it disappeared behind the ridge with a thunderous boom that shook my cabin windows. My coffee mug rattled on the wooden railing. I stood up, my heart racing. That was no meteor. The sound was wrong, too metallic, too precise. I grabbed my flashlight and jacket, then headed down the trail toward where I thought it had landed. The walk took me nearly 40 minutes through dense forest, following a path I barely knew. As I got closer, I noticed something strange. The trees were bent away from a central point, as if pushed by some massive force. Then I saw it. In a small valley between two hills, there was a craft. Not a plane or helicopter, but something completely foreign. It was smooth and dark, shaped like a teardrop about the size of a small house. Steam or smoke was rising from its surface, and it glowed faintly with a blue-green light that pulsed like a heartbeat. I stood there frozen, my flashlight beam trembling in my hand. Before I could decide whether to run or investigate, a section of the craft opened silently. A ramp extended to the ground and 3 figures emerged. They were tall and thin, with elongated limbs and large dark eyes that seemed to absorb the light around them. Their skin had a silvery sheen, and they moved with an eerie grace. I wanted to scream, but my voice was trapped in my throat. One of them raised what looked like a hand, and suddenly I felt calm, unnaturally calm. My fear melted away, replaced by a strange sense of curiosity. They communicated without words, somehow placing images and feelings directly into my mind. I understood they meant no harm. They needed help. Their species was dying, and somehow they believed I was the key to their survival. The next thing I knew, I was walking up that ramp, as if my feet were moving on their own. The interior of the craft was unlike anything I had ever imagined. Walls that seemed alive, shifting colors and patterns. A soft humming filled the air, and I felt weightless for a moment as the craft lifted off. Through what I assumed was a viewing panel, I watched my mountain home shrink below me. Then the earth itself became a blue marble against the black void of space. The journey felt both instant and eternal. When we finally stopped, I found myself staring at a world completely alien to my own. The planet was red and purple, with 2 suns hanging in the sky. Cities sprawled across the surface, but many looked abandoned, crumbling. The beings guided me out of the craft and into a massive structure that seemed to be carved from a single piece of crystal. Inside, hundreds of their kind waited, all watching me with those same dark, hopeful eyes. I stood in what appeared to be some kind of council chamber, surrounded by beings whose very existence challenged everything I thought I knew about the universe. Through the mental connection they had established with me, I began to understand their situation. Their species had thrived for millions of years, but something had gone wrong. Their ability to reproduce was failing. Children were born weaker with each generation, and now no new births had occurred in decades. They showed me visions of their history, images flooding my mind faster than I could process. They had explored countless worlds, studied thousands of species, searching for an answer to their decline. Then they discovered Earth, discovered humans, and discovered something shocking. Our biological markers, our genetic code, had elements similar to theirs, but more robust, more adaptive. They believed that somehow the solution to their survival lay within human biology. But here was the mystery that terrified me. They couldn't simply take what they needed. Their scientists had tried studying human samples collected over decades, but nothing worked. They needed willing participation, a conscious choice from a human to help them. And for reasons they couldn't fully explain, their ancient texts, prophecies written long before they even discovered Earth, spoke of a specific individual who would come from a world of blue waters and green forests, living alone on a mountain, who would hold the key to their rebirth. I was that person. They had been searching for me specifically, tracking patterns and possibilities across their understanding of space and time. The probability had led them to my mountain, to that specific night. But now came the part that made my stomach turn. I had to decide. Would I help them? And what would helping them actually mean? They took me to their medical facility, a place of soft lights and incomprehensible technology. Their lead scientist, a being older than the others, communicated a proposal. They wanted to study my biology, understand what made humans so resilient. They promised it wouldn't harm me, that I could return to Earth whenever I wished. But I would need to stay long enough for them to complete their research. Perhaps weeks, perhaps months. Time worked differently here, they explained, though I struggled to understand what that meant. I thought about my life on that mountain. I had left society because I felt disconnected, purposeless. And now, in the strangest way imaginable, I had found a purpose that seemed impossible to ignore. These beings were dying. An entire civilization, millions of years old, was fading into extinction. Could I really turn away? I agreed to help them, but on my terms. I would participate in their research, but they had to share everything with me. No secrets, no hidden agendas. I wanted to understand exactly what they were doing and why. They agreed immediately, and I sensed their relief, their hope, washing over me like a wave. The following days, or what felt like days, were surreal. They ran tests that didn't hurt but felt strange, like gentle pulses of energy moving through my body. They asked me questions about human emotions, relationships, stress, joy, survival instincts. They seemed fascinated by our capacity for adaptation, our ability to thrive in chaos and uncertainty. Their species had evolved in stability, imperfection, and ironically, that perfection had made them fragile. Then came the breakthrough. Their scientists discovered that human biological resilience wasn't just physical, it was connected to our psychology, our ability to hope against hopelessness, to fight when logic said we should surrender. They realized they needed to relearn these qualities, to reintroduce unpredictability and struggle into their existence. I wasn't a cure in the way they expected. I was a teacher, showing them that survival sometimes requires embracing imperfection. When the time came for me to leave, they returned me to my mountain just as they had promised. The craft landed in the same clearing, and I walked down the ramp into the cool night air of Earth. My cabin lights were still on, my coffee mug still sitting on the porch railing. It was as if no time had passed at all, but I had changed. I looked up at the stars differently now, knowing what was out there, knowing that somewhere in that vast darkness, a civilization was fighting to survive, inspired by the messy, beautiful resilience of humanity. I sat back down in my chair, picked up my coffee, now cold, and smiled. My quiet life on this mountain had just become a lot more interesting, and I had a feeling this was only the beginning.